Hi everybody, this is Brian O'Hara. I've been off for a little while. It's been kind of quiet over the holidays after the elections for the last budget and all that kind of thing. But I'm back now because things are starting to become very interesting in our town. We have learned recently, just last night as a matter of fact, that by the end of this fiscal year, around the end of June, July 1st is the next fiscal year, we'll be in debt by about $1,800,000. It's a lot of money for us. We have a very low fund balance right now. Hard to get any credit from any of the for any grants and things like that. We're in pretty bad shape. You probably saw that on all the other programs. If you watch the selectmen meetings every other Monday, if you watch any of the programs that are on Channel 13, you get all views on what's happening in town. My view is only just one of those views. Now, I'm supported tonight by, once again, by all the old timers that started this town and schools. Some of them are ex-school heads, some of them are ex-factory owners and factory runners, and they're all the guys that made this town what it was in its heyday. And I like to show them because they did a lot for us, they did a lot for the state, they did a lot for the country. They sold products all over the world. They set up schools and things in other places. Gilbert sent some up and out in New Orleans, just like he did here. He had a home out there too for children, like he did here. And some people were governors of the state and all that kind of thing, or close to it anyway. So I like to have them around. I feel comfortable with these kind of people because I'm kind of one of them myself. A little younger maybe, not much younger, but a little bit younger. So they're here, they'll be around for most of the program tonight. I will repeat this program 2 or 3 times as I'm allowed to. And tonight we're going to be talking a bit about the schools in our town because they're most of our budget. They're a good, I don't know the exact number right now because it fluctuates a bit from year to year and from this and that, but we're about 62% of our budget or so is probably the schools. Could be a little more or less, but it's a good percentage of our budget. And when you're looking to improve and not spend quite as much money and spend money efficiently, as a businessman, which I am, you always look where the most money is. So your tendency would be to look at the 62% rather than the 10% or the 20% or even the 30% maybe. Now, once you got done with the 62%, you would look at the 30%, and then the 20%, and then the 10%, and sooner or later you might get down to the 1 or 2%. But you wouldn't start out with the 1 or 2%. I'm going to start out by telling you a story that I told you once before on either this program or Getting Things Done. It was an Englishman. He died in 1992 or so. His name was C. Northcote Parkinson. And he wrote a book called Parkinson's Law. Any of you students watching it from the college, watching this program, you can get a copy of that one way or another on Amazon, or look in the local libraries and see if you can find a copy. I might even have a copy on my bookshelf. Somebody wants to borrow it. But he wrote that book called Parkinson's Law. Now, Parkinson's Law is things will fit the space available. So if you have a lot of space, one way or another, that space will get filled up. For example, if you have a garage, you intend the garage to be for your car or truck, or your cars and trucks, or one of each. It gets to the point after a while where you can't fit your truck or your cars in the garage anymore because your space has filled up with mowing machines, garbage cans, stuff, boxes you pack there for the winter or whatever, or summer. But one way or another, your garage fills up. Just go around your neighborhood, see how many people who don't park in their garage, because they have all kinds of other things. They use it as a storage area, basically, especially if they have a rather small house. But anyway, we're not going to talk about Parkinson's law tonight. We could talk about it when we get to talk more about the schools, because it does apply here in our school system and in our town as well. Things will expand to fit the space available. But the second chapter in the book was about Parkinson's law. And part of Parkinson's law, the second chapter in the book was about bicycle shedding. And bicycle shedding we do all the time when we're in large committees, small committees, commissions, small commissions. And we do have large commissions in our town. Most of them are too big, I think. Few are reasonably small. But if you ask somebody in a commission if the subject on the agenda is, let's talk about a $500 billion nuclear plant that we want to build in our area, the discussion will last probably 5 minutes, maybe 10, because nobody knows anything about that kind of a nuclear plant, especially that large one like that. So they'll get through that discussion pretty rapidly. But the next item on the agenda might be, let's put a new roof on the bicycle shed out in the backyard. Well, everybody knows something about a roof on a bicycle shed, so everybody has something to say about it. One person will say, well, what kind of roof do you think we want? Another person will say, well, let's put shingles on there. Well, what kind of shingles do you think we need? And somebody else will say, well, let's try glass shingles, or let's try tar shingles, or let's do some cedar shingles. And they go on about that for a while. And then somebody else will say, well, why do we need a new roof on the bicycle shed? Why don't we just tear the roof off the bicycle shed? Matter of fact, somebody else will pipe up, well, let's just take down the bicycle shed, not even have one. And some other person will say, well, you know, maybe we ought to build a new bicycle shed. And this goes on for hours and hours because everybody knows something about a bicycle shed. Maybe not so much anymore that people don't ride bicycles, but in areas like London where Parkinson, where Northcote Parkinson was, he had bicycles everywhere. If you go to Holland, everybody rides a bicycle. So a lot of bicycles still around the world in areas where they don't have as many cars, or they don't want as many cars for one reason or another. So we do a lot of bicycle shedding in our meetings. Whenever you watch a meeting, you'll find that instead of talking about the $1,800,000 debt we're going to incur between now over the year and have in our end of the year budget, we'll talk about other things like how long should the public comment be, what will we allow, how many times, and how many people, and who can talk and who can't talk. And we get into talking about that for 20, 25 minutes, and then we find out that that's called bicycle shedding, because in a recent meeting we talked about a lot of things. Only about 10 minutes did we talk about the real serious problems that we have in the town right now that you hear about and read about in the papers and see on all the other programs. Well, I went to a meeting last night as an observer. I wasn't allowed to speak, but I went to the selectmen meeting. It was called Budget Workshop. It was the second one they've had in the last few months. And the town manager and the new director of finance explained to the selectmen and finance board. We have the same finance board here as selectmen. Some aren't really qualified to be on the finance board, but in my opinion, because they don't know much about finance. But they're there. because in our town, the selectmen are the finance board, vice versa. Other towns, it's a little different. Other towns, it's the same. But anyway, I feel we're handicapped by having a finance board that isn't full of people who understand finance and who are either accountants or CPAs or own a business and have to make a payroll every week and that kind of thing. So I feel we're handicapped. But anyway, I went to the meeting, and the town manager did explain a bit about the next year's budget, which is fiscal 13-14. It starts in 1st of July. Now, we may or may not have a budget approved by then, but we have tough circumstances in our town right now, and it is not easy to get budgets approved. The taxpayers are hurting. Property values have gone down around somewhere 16-17%. But in order to raise the same amount of money for the budget, it's going to be have to raise about 18.5% on average. So a lot of people's properties are down in value, but they still have to pay the same amount of tax that they did before. And a lot of people's, even though some people's values are down, some people are above the average, so they'll have to pay more taxes. And they're very, very sensitive about that. And we do have areas here that are a little more affluent than other areas. The people in the non-affluent areas, of course, don't want to pay any more taxes. They have other ways to spend their money. And we always say, well, you know, if you had a choice between giving money for an extra school superintendent, we have 1.5 school superintendents in our town. You'd be hard-pressed to find too many towns, even triple the size of ours, that have 2 superintendents of school. But it's because we have this weird setup here where Gilbert used to be the free school. Now we pay for it, so we got to have 1.5 superintendents. We have a lot of duplication in services and things like that. They have a very strong unions in the schools as well. But basically, the affluent areas, most people who do earn money and make a lot of money and save it in their life, is, you know, sort of Ben Franklin, a penny saved is a penny earned. They watch money pretty closely. And when they see that they have a choice to pay for an extra half a superintendent or give the money to one of their grandchildren or children to go to college, or buy a home, put a down payment on a home, they're going to naturally give that money to their grandchild or their child, and or some other useful charity that they might be more interested in, or something like that, than giving it for an extra half a superintendent. I think that's the easiest way I can explain it. And there are many things we have that are that way. People question and say, why would I want to give money for that? Why do I want to give money for 3 or 4 computer systems when we should be having one? Why do I want to give money for 3 or 4 finance directors when we should be having one? Why should I be giving more money for 3, I don't want to say here, but the caretakers, instead of having one group doing it all? We often talk about the town garage doing the maintenance for everything. We own the schools. But anyway, it goes on and on. There's all kinds of duplication and things like that in our town and in our school system and between the town and the school system. And I'm going to talk a bit about that tonight. Now, what I want to say, though, is at the meeting last night, it became very, very, very apparent that we are really in financial trouble, and it's going to be a tough budget year. The town manager wants to try to keep the budget at a minimal increase, mill rate wise. We will have to raise the mill rate to meet the same expenses we had this year and our current year for next year. There are some people who think we should be cutting those expenses. And since we were told that we were going to have this $1,800,000 deficit at the end of this fiscal year, a few more months, more people want to look very, very closely at all these budgets and try to get rid of duplication and all. So after going to the meeting last night and seeing how difficult it was, about a 2-hour meeting. It'll be on TV. I don't know when they're going to run it, but it'll be on Channel 15. Keep an eye out for it. It was videotaped. And then it'll be put up on the website, the charter website. You can see it there too. And it'd be very, very interesting for you to see that and to see for yourself how the budget process works, especially if you're a student. And we do have quite a few students who watch this program. Thank God for that. And usually there are people who are more interested in business and more interested in how budgets work and how things get done and planning for success and that kind of thing. So I went home last night and I thought about it and I said, well, I think I'm going to write another one of my red papers. I used to write green papers. Green papers were how we can get ahead, how we can try to get more business in town, get more profitable recurring tax revenue into the town to help share the costs of all these the wants and needs of the town and the school system. But that didn't work. Nobody would pay too much attention to it, you know. Some people do, some people don't. But basically, over the 10, 12 years, I've been trying to help the town in the revenue area, and I've been on some commissions and things. We haven't made any progress. We're at least breaking even, if not going backwards. Some people think we are retrogressing. So I started writing red papers. Hey, we're in deep trouble here. If we're not careful, we're going to go broke. When I first started, people thought I was kidding. They thought I was joking. They said that wasn't funny. I didn't mean it to be funny. I meant it to be more of a wake-up call for people to say, hey, you better hurry up and wake up here and start watching how you spend money and try to get more additional recurring profitable tax revenue into town by bringing in some more businesses, by bringing in some developments that don't need more of services from the town than they pay for. That's what we mean by profitable. They cost us less than the money we bring in from their taxes and of all sorts. We have many different types of taxes. So I started writing the red papers. I'm up to red paper number 8 right now. I even wrote a mock obituary. Caused a few people to shake. But I did write a paper in July, a red paper, and showed them how they could put together this next budget. They didn't pay much attention to that. They're still following the sort of charter dates that are mandated. And as a result, they're not really running the town very efficiently. Sad to say that. I wish I could say differently. But anyway, tonight what I'm going to do is I'm going to read to you a red paper that I stayed up all night writing, thinking about, studying for. I wrote it to the finance board. I delivered it today by email to the town manager and asked him to pass it out to the finance board, 7 members, 5 Democrats, 2 Republicans. The Democrats are basically liberal. Republicans are more fiscally conservative, middle of the roaders, business orientated. The Democrats have a couple educators on the board, one person who works for a nonprofit, another person who is in the building industry, and another person who's retired and does some part-time teaching as well. So you really got 3 educators on there, although he did not earn his living educating. He earned his living in working with the state, which is another bureaucracy. So things work a little differently in our system. So I wrote this red paper because at the meeting last night, one of the select people said, hey, if anybody out there in the audience that can't speak at this meeting wants to pass any ideas on to the town manager to get them to the finance board, we'd be happy to take a look at them. Now, sometimes they speak with forked tongue. They say they want to look at information, but when you give them the information, they don't really want it. Also, I tend to speak a different language than they do because I was brought up as a turnaround specialist, bringing technical companies, computer companies, networking companies, internet companies to profitability and turning them into successful companies. And even when sometimes they weren't very successful to start with, that's why they brought me in. And I also did a bit for that for the IRS and other areas overseas. And Joyce and I, my wife, both from Torrington, we've lived in 14 cities, some of them twice. And we've lived in 4 countries, some of them twice. I want to say at the beginning, before I read this red paper, that we are very, very pro-education. Can't be any more pro-education than we are. I myself didn't pay too much attention in high school or grade school. I was pretty bored there. But I worked since I was 11, nights and weekends. One of my mentors was Tony Mishikowski, Mr. Route 8, Mr. Lottery, who just recently died and now has a bridge named after him. He worked with John Monetto and other Winston people to try to get the Route 8 to get as far as it did get. So I knew him. I worked there during high school at his hot dog stand down in Torrington. And then I worked in Hartford at G. Fox for a while, and then I went off to Kansas University. And the reason I went to Kansas is because it was $54 a semester, including sports activities and hospitalization if you needed any kind of medical treatment. Those days, that was quite a bit of money. Well, it was pretty cheap. One of the cheapest places to go in the country. A lot of it supported by the state of Kansas. I graduated from there with a math degree. And then I sort of drifted into computers because there weren't many people who had math degrees. Therefore, there were a lot of job opportunities. And I rose up from being a programmer, systems analyst, project manager, program manager, and to running companies, having my own companies, being a CEO and COO of companies, and a director of companies, some of them pretty big. And my last job or two before I came here, I was consulting to the Commission of the IRS about how to get to the year 2000 with this whole largest computer systems in the world, or at the IRS down in Washington, D.C. I was president and CEO of Internet Corporation down in Fort Lauderdale, Florida for a couple of years. And that was a entrepreneurial startup company. I had to go out and raise a lot of money for that company while I was working there. But anyway, I've been all over the place, traveled all over the world, 10 million miles. So I got a lot of experience. So I don't speak the same language as some of the people on the Board of Education and the people on the Board of Selectmen and Finance that have never done the same kind of things that I did. Okay, I've dealt with a different level of people, dealt with a different level of problems. Not that theirs aren't critical, they are critical. But anyway, and I financed my own education. When I got out of college, I owed $1,500. I thought it was $1 million. It took me 10 years to pay it off, $150 a year. And when you're only making $200, $300, $400 a year a month, you know, that's a little hard to do. Got to pay for an apartment and get a car and do this and do that. So I'm a firm believer in education, and my wife has been in 9 universities because we traveled around the world so much, some of them outside this country, some of them twice. Just a little short of graduating, because once we got the children, she was a full-time mom and full-time mover around from city to city and state to state and country to country. And when we had our children, we have 3, we had a discussion about our children, and we decided that it was up to us to educate these children. Not the church, not the school system, But we were responsible for making sure our children were educated. And we did. We said we can use the schools to help us, and we did. We used very good schools, mostly private schools, because when we moved around, we wanted them to be in the better schools. We even picked the towns that had the better schools to live in, and I traveled to work every day, sometimes 1 or 2 hours each way. And then we helped them get through school, helped to get through colleges. I have a daughter who has 1 and 90% of a second master's degree, speaks at least 3 languages, lives down in New York City, went to the Sorbonne in Paris, all at my expense, my and Joyce's expense. We have a son who has 2 master's degrees. One is mechanical engineering and one in finance from the 12th best finance school in the country. We paid for that with him. And we have a daughter who has a master's degree from NYU. She's in the film industry, doing quite well, has her own company. My son's doing quite well, has his executive in companies that he works for. So we believe in education. So as I talk tonight and read my red paper to you, which I'll start in a few minutes, I want you to know that we firmly believe in that, and we're now helping, or going to try to help, and have been trying to help, with the education of our grandchildren. Because we believe it's very important. We have a lot of neighbors at the lake where we live. We've had a place there since 1973, which we didn't spend much time in until about 12 years ago. And a lot of our neighbors are basically full-time mothers. They read to their kids at night. They help them make sure they get a good education, that they get involved in all the activities like Boy Scouts and church and things like that. And I find my own experience looking around is that part of the reason we have problems in our school systems now is because we don't have a lot of these full-time mothers anymore. They're working. Some people don't even have the mother and father in the same house anymore. The churches might not be as strong anymore at supporting the children and the other activities. I don't know how much they get involved anymore, but a lot of the problems we have in our school systems, we can't blame the school for. They can only take part of the blame, because the philosophy I espouse is that the parents are responsible. Whether they are or not, it's another story. So I want you to know that, because now I'm going to read this red paper, and the first thing is educators will say, well, Brian is anti-education. And I say, no, we're pro-education, very pro-education. We would be broken-hearted if our children and grandchildren didn't get a good education if they wanted one. So my red paper says, Board of Finance, Town of Winchester, care of the Town Hall, 339 Main Street, Winsted, Connecticut, 06098. Carbon copy, the town manager. Carbon copy, the town clerk. March 20th, 2013. The subject is red paper number 8. I've already given them 7 red papers and a bunch of green papers. Copies of them can be found in the town clerk's office in the town hall. They're also spread around all the other commissions, the schools and other offices in town, mayor's office and things like that. I also gave everybody 2 history books along the way too. The first 2 history books that Tony Canawa had reprinted in paperback. I bought them copies, put them everywhere I could find, free of charge, so people would become more familiar with the history of our town of Winchester. Dear Finance Board, this red paper number 8 is in response to a request made to all of us at last night's fiscal year 2013-2014 budget workshop number 2. It was the second budget workshop. I attended the first one as well. By Selectman Perez, she's an educator, for input concerning the dire financial straits that the management of the town of Winchester are now experiencing. As you are well aware, prospects for an increase of any significant amount of increased profitable additional recurring revenue for budgets in the foreseeable future are minimal at best. We are now told that the projected deficit for the current fiscal year is predicted to be at least $1,800,000 at a minimum at the close of this fiscal year, which ends at the end of June. And perhaps this deficit will be greater. We still don't really know a finite number. It's still being worked on. That was part of the subject of the meeting last night. Perhaps greater. It could be greater than 1,800,000. We have been constantly told that our infrastructure needs are enormous and growing from years of neglect. Everybody thinks that. I don't know anybody who doesn't think that. I believe that the town manager needs immediate air cover from the Board of Finance. The town manager, I'm reading off the letter now, the town manager in our town, by charter, has no control over the school budgets. None at all. The Finance Board can cut the bottom line of the school budget, but theoretically is not supposed to cut it below the state's minimum budget requirement, which is like it has to be the same as it was last year. I don't want to go into that whole thing right now. That's another program, and I will do a program about that, but not tonight. So the town manager, although he's the CEO of the town, can't do much about that 62% of our budget. But the Finance Board can. They can work with the Board of Education and the state to try to balance our budget and our ability to pay for the things that the state wants us to do but doesn't provide us with funds to do, or provides us with funds to do things for a short period of time, and then when they pull out, like they did back in 1983 on some reneges on some things, then we're stuck paying for them as taxpayers, whether we want them or not. The town can't continue to bear the brunt of the budget cuts as we sink deeper into the mire. I believe, as do many others, that the main financial problems here have been brewing for the last 10 years in both the town and schools. That was stated a lot last night. And must be, mainly last night they talked about the town, not the schools, and they must be resolved before they become much worse. Many taxpayers have years ago lost confidence in the Board of Education's ability to manage budgets because of their fiscal difficulties, and the feeling still persists to this day. Many taxpayers have also been suspicious about the town management's ability to manage their budget for many years. The suspicions have now become a reality. The zero budget increases over the years that people keep complaining about have been the taxpayers' message to management. A warning, a wake-up call that has not been heeded. Now is the time to A. Institute an across-the-board spending freeze immediately, allowing only absolutely essential expenditures, include the schools if possible, and look for savings for this fiscal year. Of course, they're already doing this. I'm just trying to re-emphasize that how important it is to freeze the budget now for the next few months till the end of the fiscal year, spend only where absolutely necessary to try to keep the deficit down for the future, work with the Board of Education to get the schools involved if possible as well. It's not easy. The Board of Education does not like to work with the Finance Board. It's a real problem for us in our town. B, and this is very important, get with the Board of Education and the state and get them to agree to reduce the 2013-2014, that's next fiscal year, Town of Winchester education budget by whatever amount necessary to resolve the deficit problem now. Now, not next year. Well, we'll have to work into next year, but we should plan for it now. We should know exactly what we're going to do and how we're going to resolve it in the next budget. And we have a few months to plan that and to begin to put it into effect with the Board of Education and Gilbert and pre-K through 6. For example, combine and eliminate duplicate functions between the town, Gilbert, and pre-K through 6, etc. This is not new thinking. John Gauger's been talking about this for 15, 20 years. Had his own TV program for many years where he talked about it. I used to watch him when I first came to town. Close a school or two. We have more students. We have less students now, and over the years it's been going down. And just to use a figure of speech, the educators don't like to hear this, but we probably we have 4 schools. We probably need 2 of them. The other 2 could be closed down, but for many reasons, the school board does not want to do that. That's, again, Parkinson's law. They want to try to fill the buildings to fit the space available, and mainly because they don't want to have to reduce their budget and lower their minimum budget requirement, which means they will have to spend less on education. Reduce the busing. I'm 75 years old and I can walk 6-10 miles a day very easily because I've done it all my life. I tell people when I was a child we didn't have any car until I was in high school or so. Used a bicycle for a while. Well, we walked downtown, 1.5 miles, walked home, 1.5 miles, walked to the Y, 1.5 miles, walked home, 1.5 miles, walked down to play sports in town, 1.5 miles, walked home, 1.5 miles, walked to girlfriend's house, mile, walked back home, another mile. So it's pretty easy. You went to church, you walked to church, you walked home from church. Whatever activity you went to, you walked to the movie, you walked home again. You know, you could be walking 10, 15 miles a day. And most people did that. Now, we have to bus everybody. I don't want to get into all the reasons for that, but it's very expensive. It costs us $3 million for 2 years worth of busing. And the kids are getting heavy, aren't they? They're also getting free breakfasts now and free lunch and, all kinds of things like that. Now, I'm not against that. But I do think that some rationalization should happen because costs keep escalating all the time. But there's always more that people want to do, not less. And if I have time, I'll give you a couple examples of that. Have one superintendent instead of 1.5. I figure the extra half superintendent with staff and support and expenses and everything else, and probably medical insurance and all, probably costs you $500,000 a year. That ain't bad. Maybe you could fix a bridge with that. Maybe you could fix 2 bridges with it. I don't know. So you could fix 1 bridge a year with it. That would help, wouldn't it? So when people ask me why we don't fix the bridges, I'll say, well, that's because we got to pay for an extra half a superintendent. And I don't list it all in the red paper, but, multiple computer systems, multiple purchasing departments, receiving departments, it goes on and on. And we haven't even talked about consolidating the medical insurances across the town, maybe even with other towns in the state, cities in the state, like John Gauger talks about. The vouchers can help get them out to other schools. There are some problems with that. But let me just reemphasize a little, it's not in this paper, but for credibility reasons, anybody who really needs the attention should get it. I don't have a problem with that. I don't think anybody else does either. The needy and people who really need the help should get the help. And we should try to make that happen. But we have to give a lot of help to people who don't really need the help. But because we have government mandates for one reason or another, which I'll talk about on a different program, we must give them help. That's very costly. Back to the letter. Don't take no for an answer when you talk to the Board of Education. If you can't get them to go to the state for help by yourself, Finance Board, and shake things up if you must. There are many people in town, including myself, believe that if the Board of Education and the Finance Board go to the state, they'll probably be able to reduce the MBR. The state doesn't like to waste money either. The state doesn't really want to pay for empty buildings or half-empty buildings. If they can work out of 3 instead of 4, they'd probably prefer that. If they work out of 2 instead of 4, because they have other cities and towns that could probably use the money as well. And they don't have enough to go around in these times. C, get extremely serious about an increase in additional profitable recurring revenue. See my 2006 green papers to you, to the Board of Education, and at the time the 3 PTOs, advising you to work to increase the revenue and begin sinking funds for town and school needs. A sinking fund is a fund you put money into for your child's education. That's a child's education sinking fund. Or for buying a new home, that's a new home sinking fund. You don't touch it for anything else. And you try to grow it until you can afford to pay for the education, pay for the home, or whatever else the sinking fund is for. Now, politicians don't like sinking funds because once some money's put in a sinking fund for a specific purpose, they can't move it around willy-nilly. And they don't like that. Part of the reason we're in the pickle we're in the town right now is because we have moved money around willy-nilly for one reason or another, which we don't all understand yet, but we'll find out over the next few months. When the audits are done and the police investigations are done and all the facts are on the table and we can pull the political cloth away from the top and see what the real facts are. D, maintain a balanced budget each year. That's using a technique which I explained to them in another paper red paper called Management by Objectives. Very well known management technique. We don't do that in our town. E, conduct quarterly reviews every 3 months of revenue and expenditures, taking actions where necessary to keep on plan or adjust the plan. That's called management by exception, another well-known technique, managing budgets, while there is still time to meet your objectives. I'll explain a bit about that. I have explained it on my programs over the 6 years I've been doing them here. For 5 years I did them once a week. Never repeated a program. But whenever you make decisions in your family or in your business or in your town, you're not going to make 100% correct decisions when you manage by objectives. What you have to do is put a plan together, and I'll show you on another program. I'll repeat a program that I did. I'll do it fresh, but same program I did years ago and have been doing for 30, 40 years for people. I wrote articles about it 30, 40 years ago. You make decisions. You put a plan together. You all agree it. Then you have change control. And you don't change it without agreement and without need. But most of the decisions you make when you make the plan won't happen. Because people usually only write about 50% of the time, 55% of the time, some a little higher, some a little lower. So what you have to do is watch the situation every day, every hour, like they do in a hospital, in the emergency room. They watch your pulse every second, or less even, to see if anything's changing. We have to do that with your plans. And then, when you see something's changing, you have to manage by exception. You have to say, how can we fix that? How can we get it so our plan does come in on target, on budget, expense and revenue, or less expense and revenue, or more expense and revenue, whatever it takes to get the job done. But you have to do this while there is still time to meet your objectives. We were sitting around last night in the room, and they were trying to figure out how they can make up a whole bunch of work in the next couple of months. They can't do it. They can't make up the debt of $1,800,000 that they're going to be sitting on here at the end of June in the next few months. They can't close schools in a couple of months. They can't change all that things in a few months. But if they did quarterly reviews, and they managed it every quarter, then they can make decisions every quarter to make sure. For example, if they had a quarter review after the first 3 months, they'd have 3 more quarters to fix the problem. And again, if they did the same thing after the 6 months, they'd have 6 more months to fix the problem. Well, we don't do that here. We certainly don't do it out in the open, transparently, so everybody can be aware of the problems. The Republicans tend to work that way because they're businessmen. The Democrats tend to say, well, let's have a nice community. Let's build a community. But they don't tell you any of the things they're going to do that. And as a result, we don't seem to do it. That's a problem. In my past here, I'm an unaffiliated voter, but everybody in town except the liberal Democrats were in favor of growth, in favor of getting businesses in, and in favor of getting in industry down the corridor, in favor of getting in profitable developments and things like that. F, stop publicly underestimating the revaluation's effect on property values. Property values have gone down, as I said earlier, 16-17%. It takes more than that to get the money back because you got to have more of the 16 or 17% to get back up to the top again. So stop publicly underestimating the reval property value impact and water and sewer increases on the taxpayers. We are going to get, starting pretty quick, there's a public hearing on it tonight I'll be going to. This is the first day. I'm on the 20th here. I'm going to be repeating this program, so it'll be over when if next people see it. But they're going to raise the water and sewer rates. The water rates go up 20% or so, and the sewer rates are going to go up about 35%. There's a lot of reasons for that. I won't go into on this program, but they're going to increase. So property values have gone down. The mill rate has to be boosted up. It means you'll still pay the same taxes, maybe, if you're lucky, as before. Maybe some will pay less, some will pay more, because there's an average involved here. But you'll be paying it for properties worth an average of 16-17% less. And as I said in a prior program, that's like the candy bar effect. When I was young, they had big candy bars for a nickel. Over the years, the candy bar has shrunken down. It's a tenth of the size, and it's $1. So we can't seem to get this across to people in town that are liberal and don't understand it. There's a lot of jiggery-pokery going on. So they got to stop that. I believe that these factors, coupled with a complete lack of confidence in their leaders' financial decisions, may have an impact at budget time. And maybe it won't, maybe it will. Depends how the taxpayers feel. Depends how well the people are prepped out there that have to pay the taxes. And I will warn you, if you own property, listen to all sides of the story before you make up your mind on how you're going to vote. Because it will cost you if the mill rate goes up, and you may not get any value for your money. G, if not possible to do any of these things, you will have to find another way to win back the confidence of the taxpayers if you are to succeed. You might not be able to get the minimum budget requirement down and save any money. So either then you got to raise the mill rate and get more taxes from people that are having a rough time paying now, or you have to decimate the town organizations to try to save the money. I don't want to go into it here because it would take a whole program, but they're pretty brutal. And there are alternatives. One is going bankrupt, which I hope we don't have to do, but you never know. And the other is having the state come in and take over. That can be pretty rough. If you want to see how rough, read my red paper on the mock obituary I wrote, should the town be taken over by the state or go bankrupt. The taxpayers are owners of the town. They are very demanding and are results orientated. It's a term we use in business, results orientated. They like to see results. Hiding information is not good with results-oriented people. They want to know the facts. I'm going to do a separate program about that as well over the next few weeks. Show them financial results. Show the taxpayers financial results. Gain their confidence, and you will win them over for responsible increases when necessary, I'm sure. Taxpayers are reasonable people. If they think their money is being spent wisely, if they think they're getting a good education for their children and they're not in the bottom 30% of the state tax test results, or even in the median, and they're paying a reasonable amount of money, they'll be happy to pay a reasonable amount on tax increases. I'm pretty sure that happens everywhere else. Nobody likes paying it, but they do. Sincerely, Brian O'Hearn, 211 West Wakefield Boulevard, Winston, Connecticut, 06098. Now, as we close, and we're going to close in a couple of minutes, the March 18th Board of Selectmen meeting will be on tonight, Wednesday at 7 p.m. on Channel 15. You should watch that meeting if you're interested in the town budget process. That meeting's mostly about the public comment argument that's going on in town right now, but be worth watching it. The March 19th budget workshop that I just talked about, and you should watch that, will be on Thursday at 7 p.m. That's tomorrow night. Those are the dates that these two meetings will be aired. Once again, March 18th, Board of Selectmen will be on tonight at 7 p.m., Channel 15. The March 19th, last night's budget workshop, number 2, which we talked about just now, will be on at 7 p.m. And there you can hear all the detail that I didn't have time to talk about tonight. I hope you can hear it. I haven't watched it yet. Now, both of these will go up onto the Charter website. Anybody who has access to the internet can see them 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, around the world. If you're on a business trip over in Europe, you can still watch these if you have a computer and the internet. So keep those in mind, and keep your eye on these budgets. They're going to be very important for this town over the next 4 or 5 months and the future. With that, I'd like to say thank you for watching. This program will be repeated a couple times, probably this Saturday, maybe next week sometime. So keep an eye on the Charter board they put up all the time. And if anybody wants to see it, point them to it. Thank you very much. Good night.